Now let's go ahead and create an exploit. We are now using a CentOS 7 machine. The other machine that we'll be testing on is a Windows 10 machine. We have the latest operating system. We have the latest antivirus installed on that machine. What we have in our controlled environment is two machines. One will be the attacker machine and one will be the victim machine. The Windows 10 machine will be the victim machine, and this, the CentOS 7 machine, will be used as the attacker machine. Just as a disclaimer again, this exercise is being done in a controlled environment. You do not want to be taking Veil and using it on unsuspecting victims because there are significant penalties and potential lawsuits against you if you are caught. This exercise right now is being done in a closed environment that we own both machines, and we are using this purely as a demonstration purpose only. So the first thing we need to do is go to the Veil directory and run Veil. You do not want to be using these exploits on any unsuspecting victims, as there are significant penalties for doing so. This is being done in a closed environment. So the first thing we want to do here is go to the Veil directory. We've already installed Metasploit. We've already installed Veil. Now we want to run the Veil program, and we do that by going to the Veil directory, which is cd veil-evasion. And within that directory, we're looking for the veil-evasion.py file here in green. Let's run that file, and then I'll explain that dashboard to you. Once we have that dashboard visible, let's run the program, and you'll see it shows up Veil Evasion 2.2.7. You'll see there are 51 payloads loaded here, so there are already payloads within Veil that we can use, and there are some available commands that are listed here as well. I'll go through those commands, but you can see 51 is written in green, and these payloads are already available for us. If we want to get information on a specific payload, we simply type in info and the number of the payload, and we will get information about that payload. The rating, how effective it is, how dangerous it is, etc. If I want to get a list of all the available payloads, I simply type in list. We'll do the list shortly, and then look through the list of payloads that are already available. There are a bunch of payloads available, so let's just go through some of them. You'll see they all have unique numbers next to them. We also have scripts or payloads written in Ruby. We have them in Python. We have PowerShell. We have even web server exploits and payloads that are listed here in 45, 46, 47, etc. We have the reverse TCP. We have PowerShell. We have injection payloads. You can play around with the different payloads to figure out what information each one has, how potent they are, etc. But for now, if you wanted any specific information on a payload, I can simply type in info and the name of that payload or the number of that payload. And as you can see, there are HTTP, HTTPS, reverse TCP, there's bind TCP. There are quite a few different payloads that you could be using. So let's go up and have a look what else there is. There's PyInstaller wrappers, there's Cold War wrappers. Again, you can find information on all these different types of payloads when you get an opportunity to do so. If I want the info on this particular reverse TCP payload, I can simply go and type in info and then type in the number, which here is, let's look at number 49. So once we type in 49 for this particular payload, we should see some options of what we can use to create that payload. Here we have the name, the language it's written in, the rating, in normal rating here, the description of what it is, and there are some required options. As you can see, the current values in the middle column, which we would need to set for the payload to run correctly, because it'll compile that payload for us and create something that is quite random, that is going to bypass most antivirus solutions, which we'll then test on a Windows 10 machine shortly. Now let's go back to the list, and I want to look for the Python Meterpreter reverse TCP, which we'll be using here, and that number is 34. So to create the payload for that particular reverse TCP, we need to firstly note down the number 34, and we want to go back to the command line and type in info and that particular number. Once we type in info 34, it will then present the information about the payload for us and show us the options required to create the payload. So let's go in and type in info 34, and we will then be presented with a screen that will show us all the options for that particular payload. It'll tell us the rating of the payload and also give us the required options to then create the payload correctly. Let's have a look at the info here, and as you can see, it does give us a number of required options. To use the payload, we simply type in use and then the number of this payload that you had noted down previously, which was 34. So we type in use 34, and it will then present the screen, which now says the payload has been loaded. Now we see the reverse TCP listing here in the bottom section, and we now have to set the different options. So firstly, we want to set the L host, which will be the IP address of this machine, which has Metasploit and Veil installed, this machine being the attacker machine. We want to run the file on the victim's machine and then open up the port back to this attacker's machine so we can take control of their machine without them knowing that we have installed a malware device on their machine. Now let's go ahead and type in set lhost, and let me get the IP address of this machine. We are using this in a closed environment, so it will be a local IP address within the network. As you can see, there's the compile to exe, which says yes. We have set lhost, and the IP address for this machine is 192.168.56.101. So we have the IP address for this machine. Veil, Metasploit have been installed, and once we set the lhost, we can then view the actual options again. And let's have a look at the options if lhost has been set. So we type in options here, and we look at the options. We see now the lhost has been set to the IP address of this machine, the attacker's machine. So lhost has been set. We're using the L port of the machine, which is 4444. We can change that port if we want to. I won't be changing it here, but just to understand, this is how we can change these settings. You simply type in set, you type in the name of the component you want to change, and then type in the value. Now to generate the payload, we type in generate. We need to create a base name for the output file, which is default is payload. We want to call this something like game. What we want to do is then create the executable file and then take the executable file on an USB device and take that to the Windows machine to show how it is able to bypass the antivirus solutions. So I simply type in game here, and once I press enter, it tells me how would you like to create your payload executable. I can use PyInstaller and a few other options here. I will just use one for now, keep it as the default. So we use PyInstaller, press 1, and press return or enter. And what will happen now is it will create the payload for us. Once the payload is done, it will give us a path name. I will go to the path name and then take the executable file from there and put it onto a USB device. Now this screen will take a short while to create the payload. It may require me pausing the video and then coming back shortly. But what we'll see here is some warnings. That's no problem. And it will go through and create the payload for us. And once the payload has been created, we will be presented with a screen that looks very similar to this, which now says your payload files have been generated. Don't get caught. Again, this is done in a closed environment. You don't want to be using it in an uncontrolled environment on an unsuspecting victim. There are huge penalties and you don't want to be going down that path. Use this for ethical means only. As you'll see here, the path name is listed as z:/root/veil evasion/dist/game.exe. So that's the encrypted file that Veil has created for us. We want to take this particular file, put it onto a USB device, and then take it to a Windows 10 machine with the latest antivirus software, and then install it on that machine, which we'll be doing in the next video. So this video has just been able to show how to use Veil to create a very simple payload using the options of the reverse TCP and also encrypting that file in a random way so we can then potentially infect the victim's machine, which we'll do in the next video. Again, this tutorial is being run in a controlled environment. A skilled hacker would be using email, or like we saw in the Mr. Robot TV show, hackers could potentially use it on a music CD that then the unsuspecting victim puts on their machine.